And Max, if you're ready, you can start.
That's good.
Good morning. My name is Max Hughes. I work with MEMA's Recovery Division as a program coordinator. So to start off the presentation, I'm going to go into some slides about FEMA's public assistance funding and the criteria that FEMA uses to consider eligible funding for debris management. Next slide. So here's a list of the document requirements for FEMA that would be used to substantiate what your eligible funding for your debris would be. So starting off, basically location, address, GPS locations, photos of the debris you're going to be removing. Basically the same location, address, GPS photos of temporary staging sites and debris final resting site. So these are very important because FEMA really needs all these coordinates and photos to substantiate your claim of debris. Next would be quantities and types of debris. Force account labor. They would want your employee names, days, hours worked, timesheets, payroll documentation. Force account equipment, or rented equipment, operator's name, types of equipment, and the personnel attached that was using that equipment. Years, makes, models, size, and capacity of the equipment. Then for contractors, they'd want your contract. They'd want your contract, the invoices, load tickets, days, and hours used, and certifications of truck size and capacities. So for selecting disposal sites, here's some do's and don'ts. So for all sites, you want to obtain permits for the applicable federal, state, territorial, tribal, and local regulatory agencies. Another, if you're burning debris as a reduction method, please obtain guidance from the applicable state, territorial, tribal, local regulatory agency to determine where the burning can be conducted. Things to avoid, areas such as endangered species, critical habitats, archaeological sensitive areas, rare ecosystems, contaminated sites, well fields, or surface waters. If near these areas, establish a buffer or tributary barriers. Another thing is to avoid areas of close proximities to schools, nursing homes, hospitals, historical buildings, residences, or public water supplies, especially in windy areas due to dust and odors. And then a do not is always do not dispose in wetlands and floodplains. Next is some types of debris. So these are the main types of debris that you would see. Vegetative debris is the most common. Then we got construction and demolition debris, hazardous waste, household hazardous waste, electronic waste, white goods, soil, mud, and sand, vehicles and vessels, putrescent debris, which is carcasses of dead animals and such, infectious waste, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear contaminated debris are all types of debris that are considered eligible under FEMA. Now I'm just going to touch base on debris monitoring a bit because you'll hear much more when we get into GMC's slide at the end. But as in FEMA's criteria, it is best interest of local governments to obtain debris monitors to oversee the debris operations. Debris monitors will be responsible for initiating debris load tickets at a contractor's debris loading sites and estimating the recording the quantities of the debris in cubic yards on the debris load tickets of all vehicles entering temporary debris sites. So here's some stuff that applicants' debris monitors should be doing. Fully understanding the responsibilities in accordance with the terms of the debris removal contract and other guidance provided by the applicant. Possesses the capability to establish debris quantities accurately and objectively. understanding all phases of debris management operations, including low tickets debris management sites, also known as DMSs, and finally, disposition locations. Also being able to differentiate between debris types, being able to complete low tickets properly, understanding site safety procedures, communicating effectively and efficiently, assessing previous construction site experience is preferred but not necessary, having general knowledge pertaining to the operation of large construction machinery is preferred but not necessary. You can notice debris monitors do not need to be registered professional engineers to be debris monitors. So this will break down into types of debris monitors. So applicant needs to monitor all aspects of debris removal operations, including activities at all loading, staging, and disposal sites. Debris monitors may have different roles and responsibilities at different stages of or components of the debris removal operation. An individual may assume the role of each monitoring type at various stages of the disaster. Debris monitors report directly to the field supervisor regarding their daily oversight. All logs and load tickets are submitted daily to the field supervisor. So the first is a loading site monitor. The primary duties are to estimate load volumes and issuing load tickets at the load sites, retaining a copy of the tickets for detailed descriptions of load tickets, chain of custody, reference to in Appendix B, sample debris management, and monitoring forms. Maintaining logs of daily subcontractors' performance, eligibility, and other activities as required. Can be a roving monitor who follows a truck around throughout the day or checks in on multiple loading trucks, produces roving monitoring reports. The second type of debris monitor is a tower/site monitor. Their primary duties are accurately measuring and documenting load hauling compartments prior to debris hauling operations and recertifying on a regular basis. Collecting and physically controlling load tickets, ensuring that all debris is removed from the truck at the DMSs. Monitoring the DMS's development and restoration, and overseeing debris reduction, whether it's grinding, burning, or chipping, etc. The third debris monitor type is field supervisor. Their primary duties are scheduling and deploying the loading and tower debris monitors and overseeing their daily activities at loading sites and disposal and staging sites. They also conduct and oversee truck certifications, load measurements, and photo documentation, which is required by FEMA. Collecting daily logs from the debris monitors and tabulating truckloads data for the daily report. This is an example of some physical load tickets. So basically it shows you how they would fill it out if you had a debris monitor providing these load tickets to you and showing what kind of debris that they were picking up, the truck numbers, dates, the load capacities, and all that. So these are the physical load tickets. Later on, they're going to talk about some virtual systems they also use, but this is how the old school physical tickets would look, which FEMA would want. These are some debris management resources from the state side. These are all access links that will bring you over to the debris management plans for an example, and the debris management state plan. The next slide will show the federal debris planning and the PA program resources. So these will show you all the Papa G guidances, which is FEMA's policy and guidance forms that will dictate what is eligible for federal funding under FEMA. Then it also has some other smaller resources about FEMA debris estimating guides, and then some policy changes that are going to be occurring with the new Papa G version 5 coming out. It's not officially in yet, so we're still in effect of version 4. And I believe that's the last slide.
Great, thanks, Max. Next up, we have John Fisher from DEP.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Mark?
Sure can. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks. Can I have the next slide, please? So first, just by way of introduction, I should say that I come at this from a solid waste management perspective at MassDEP. I'm our Deputy Division Director for Solid Waste and oversee our solid waste management programs, and among that, focus a lot of my time and effort on solid waste capacity issues, which are very relevant when it comes to disaster debris management. And as part of that role, I've been tasked with working on disaster debris planning with MEMA through the years. Several of us will touch on these points today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. But some of the real important things about planning for disaster debris management and the critical elements of disaster debris planning include understanding roles and responsibilities in advance. That's very difficult to work out in the wake of a disaster event. So understanding those roles and responsibilities in advance is really important. We just heard a little bit about federal reimbursement requirements, including monitoring. The more that you plan in advance, the better prepared you are to accurately track and monitor your activities, ensure that you're collecting eligible debris only, and ensure more complete reimbursement in the event of a federal disaster declaration. Understanding coordination with state agencies is important as well. I'll talk a little bit about what we're looking for at MassDEP when it comes to temporary debris management sites. Of course, clearing debris more quickly and cost effectively is very important. Just getting your community back on track and back going economically, and getting everyone back able to move around and return to their normal activities. And then going back to the point about disposal capacity, maximizing debris segregation is a critical element that we look to emphasize in disaster debris planning, and minimizing the amount of debris that we send to solid waste disposal facilities is really, really critical given our limited capacity both in Massachusetts and throughout the Northeast United States. Next slide, please. So I think this slide really, in a really simple way, shows our limited disposal capacity in Massachusetts. We have, for practical purposes, we have 5 active landfills. We do have some other landfills that accept, for example, municipal waste, combustion, ash, but in terms of active landfills that accept solid waste from on a commercial basis, essentially, we have 5 active landfills. We also have 5 active waste to energy facilities, although those facilities often are not a great place to send certain categories of disaster debris. And we already, on a net basis, send a lot of waste to disposal facilities in other states for disposal. And we know that the states around us are facing strained disposal capacity as well. So this is not unique to Massachusetts. This holds true throughout New England and the Northeast U.S. Next slide, please. So from my perspective, I'm really attuned to the fact that everyone's busy. Probably most of you are wearing multiple hats. I know from my own perspective, it's sometimes difficult to focus on disaster debris planning when we're not facing a disaster event and we're trying to do our regular jobs, managing our regular waste generation, our regular responsibilities. But I would just, from my perspective, I think it's really important to do the best you can with disaster debris planning. And from my perspective, it's important that you start, that you have some elements of a disaster debris plan and you can build on those over time. So identifying roles and responsibilities and resources, whether that's your own resources or contracted resources available to you. Delia will talk a little bit about mutual aid as another source of resources later. And then understanding what sites might potentially be used as temporary disaster debris management sites. These are sites that normally, in normal conditions, would typically require a solid waste site assignment and permit, but if they're used on a temporary basis for disaster debris only, can be approved simply with a notice and sign off from the MassDEP Regional Solid Waste Program. Of course, that's really best done before a disaster event. So I really encourage you to give that some thought, get in touch with our regional solid waste program, get in touch with me if you like, and we can talk with you a little bit about that. Last thing you want to do is activate a site, start using a site, and then be told you can't use that location. So it's really important to get that cleared up in advance and come to some understanding about what sites you'd like to use. And, one thing is that, different sites may be used for different things. So we may say, we don't want household hazardous waste going to a particular area, perhaps, but if you want to bring tree debris there, maybe that's okay. So this can be customized a little bit, and different sites may be used for different material streams. And we're happy to have that discussion with you because we do realize that the ideal site is probably not available in most of our communities. Next slide, please. So MassDEP has prepared our version of disaster debris planning guidance. We have that in the form of a short guidance document, and then also a kind of a checklist plan document to help you kind of work through some of the key issues with disaster debris planning. I think Max had showed the link to the Westboro Disaster Debris Management Plan as another example. We've tried to keep this really concise and really simple. There's much more detailed guidance available from FEMA on disaster debris management planning, but we've tried to capture what we think are the real key points in a real concise and kind of abbreviated fashion as again with that theme that some basic planning is really important, and maybe you're not going to do a really long, extensive, detailed disaster debris plan, but if you can start with the basics and then as you work through disaster events, add to that over time. I think that's, I'd encourage you to go that route. If you have time to do a more thorough plan, that's excellent and beneficial and valuable, but really important to start somewhere. Next slide, please. So we've worked with a handful of communities and regional groups on disaster debris planning, and would be happy to, connect with anyone else after the call to have some more conversations about this, provide some more guidance on what we're looking for from a debris management site perspective, and happy to have more conversations with any community or regional group about that going forward. Next slide, please. So circling back to some of the key themes here, maximizing debris segregation and diversion from the point of collection forward. So whether that's right-of-way collection or whether that's separate collection at a drop-off location, keeping debris segregated to begin with is obviously really important to enabling as much debris to be diverted from disposal as possible. Once debris becomes mixed, that's virtually impossible. Understanding potential debris management sites in advance. We'll hear much more about debris monitoring, which is really critical from a reimbursement perspective. And then, another really important thing, some of you may be local emergency management directors as well, or you may work closely with them, or maybe you don't. So understanding your disaster debris planning in the context of other local emergency management planning is really, really critical. So if you're thinking about using a particular site as a temporary DMS, you really need to know whether anyone else in your community is planning to use that location as well. So that coordination, again, in advance is really important. I would just say one thing that I'll add, it's not on my slides here, but probably most of you have done some form of debris management planning through the years. You may not have a written plan about it, but chances are all of you have experienced a significant storm event that generates, elevated quantities of debris, and you've managed that debris in some shape or form. Maybe it was a federal disaster declaration, maybe it wasn't, but you've probably done this somewhere along the line, or your colleagues in your community have. So I think most of you probably are not starting from ground zero here. You have some experience, you've done some work on this before, and probably the first step is just, building off of that. What did we do in the past? What worked well? What didn't work well? Let's put that in writing and build on that going forward and make our planning more efficient and more effective as we go. Next slide, please. So temporary disaster debris management sites requires a notice to the Mass DEP Regional Office or Solid Waste Program. We, assuming we're generally okay with that location, that does not require a permit from us going up to 90 days of operation. We can also potentially extend that beyond 90 days if necessary, but we do need to receive notice about that and have a chance to affirm that that site's okay. We do have siting criteria in our guidance. We recognize that, you know, in disaster situations and emergency situations, the perfect site is probably not available. So we look to, you know, try to fit those siting criteria as best as possible. Our guidance also has recommended best management practices for opening, operating, and closing temporary DMS. The basic theme here is you want to return the site to the pre-disaster condition when you're done using it. These are not intended to be ongoing sites. They're intended to be used on a temporary basis, then closed, then returned to their pre-disaster condition. Next slide, please. So, you know, some of the DMS criteria that we look to, and again, recognizing that probably not all of these are going to be available in every community, but these are some of the things that you want to think about. Publicly owned and controlled sites are obviously preferred to privately owned sites. Of sufficient size is a really difficult one for us in Massachusetts and throughout the Northeast, but you obviously want to think about the size of a site. How can you move trucks in and out of it? Do you have sufficient space to store debris piles? That's where sometimes having multiple sites for multiple debris categories may be helpful. Having the ability to get in and out of the site is obviously critical. Ideally, you know, you don't want to be going through, you know, residential neighborhoods. You want to try to get to the site from major transportation arteries. Ideally, being able to open the site without major modifications. Think about sites that are not in a floodplain. That's obviously problematic. And then as best as we can, we want to look to meet setbacks, including drinking water, surface water bodies, and residences, as well as other sensitive land uses, schools, healthcare facilities, things like that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our webpage for disaster debris management. I think, as was mentioned in the chat, these slides will be shared following the training here. You can also just go to the Mass DEP website and search for disaster debris, and it will bring you to our resources. This is my email address. If you want to follow up with me after the training today, email is the best way to reach me initially. Happy to talk more about any questions that we don't get to here today. And that's the end of my slides. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it, John. Thanks for that. Next up, we'll have our Ashbridge team.
Good morning, everybody. It is such a great pleasure to be here today. I'm Delia Camacho, Vice President at Ashbridge, and joining me here today from Team Ashbridge is Senior Vice President Rob Ray. So today's presentation, we're going to review the historical disaster events that have impacted the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, take a little dive into the Commonwealth's contract for disaster debris management services, discuss the importance of blue sky preparedness, and what are the requirements for contract activation. We'll also go ahead and review the Ashbridge's mutual and benefit use agreement, review the differences and phases of the operational and planning cycle, and also provide helpful training and educational preparedness resources that are available to you through Ashbridge. So Ashbridge is a government solutions provider and a national leader in rapid response emergency management, turnkey logistics, and disaster debris removal. We have over 32 years of experience across 34 states, to include Puerto Rico and Haiti, and our seniors operations team has worked together for over 20 years. We've been activated in over 100 federally declared disaster events and 52 special environmental projects, and we've managed over 500 disaster recovery projects. Over the last 10 years, we've collected over 48 million cubic yards of debris. Now, to put that into perspective, That equates to about 19,200 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or about 17 Empire State Buildings. So Ashford has been a committed contracting partner with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since 2011. And since then, we've had 23 activations that required the use of the Commonwealth's state contract. These events included, there were in 2011, and they included the Halloween Nor'easter. I'm sure everybody remembers that. We collected over 100,000 cubic yards of debris within the city of Agawam, the town of Wilbraham, and the city of Chicopee. And in addition to that, in 2011, we also saw some EF3 tornadoes impact the state, mostly in 3 jurisdictions, which included the city of Springfield, the town of Monsoon, and the town of Wilbraham. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Disaster Debris Management Service contract was just recently re-procured in 2021, and it actually extends through November of 2032. It is one of the most comprehensive state contracts designed to handle large-scale and standard storm events, and it offers an extra layer of protection during emergency events. This is great because it allows for pre-planning and preparation to expedite the recovery efforts to restore normalcy, and it's also available to all municipalities within the Commonwealth. Some of the scopes and services offered under the contract include emergency road clearance service, temporary debris management sites and aggregation site management and operations, right-of-way collection, processing, disposal of uncontaminated vegetative debris, C&D, electronic waste, household hazardous waste, white goods, and also the removal, processing, and disposal of hazardous limbs, trees, and stumps. So when do you use a state contract? Basically, you use a state contract when there is no pre-position contract in place, and there's a need for a procurement avenue in the event of emergencies. Also, you use a contract when local response and resources have been exhausted or overwhelming, additional support is required, and resources to manage that debris removal. So what are the requirements for contract activation? Basically, agencies that do not have those pre-positioned contracts in place can utilize the state contract. The only thing that's required is the signing of the mutual benefit and use agreement with Ashbridge. And basically, it's a mutual agreement that consents to the terms, conditions, procurement, and services provided under the state contract. Also, what's required, a notice to proceed and a purchase order from the municipalities. Now, these MUAs can be signed in any time, post or pre-event. There's really no need to wait for a declaration. They are benefits to signing the mutual and benefit of use agreement pre-event. And basically the benefits are it's advanced planning. You know, it helps us build that client relationship. And building that relationship, we determine the operational needs and services required for that particular municipality. We also assist with temporary debris management site assessments to make sure they're viable. We provide customized in-house training annually, and also provide customized education outreach and resources. So these next couple of slides will focus on the importance of blue sky preparedness. Now, blue sky preparedness begins with a pre-position contract. Whether you utilize the state contract or procure your own contract, a pre-position contract is the first step to blue sky preparedness. Now, the state's contract is an added tool in your toolbox. It's the easy button that you push, and it's an insurance policy for which you don't have to pay a premium, and you can utilize it only when needed. So why is debris planning important? Well, if you look at the picture, that picture speaks 1,000 words, and this picture was taken in the aftermath of Hurricane Michael in 2018 in Panama City Beach. Now, disaster planning plans for worst case scenario events. It minimizes the risk to public health and safety, and also ensures safe, efficient, responsible removal, disposal, and recycling of debris. It also plans for a coordinated response effort pre-event and identifies key stakeholders, their roles and responsibilities, and helps plan and develop partnerships and sharing of resources through those mutual aid agreements. Now, these are important because normally, you know, you're not always going to have that big catastrophic event. You're going to have smaller events that really, they don't get that emergency declaration. So what happened, debris removal is costly. And it's wise to go ahead and sharing those resources and sharing those costs through those mutual aid agreements between towns and municipalities. In addition, debris planning determines the resiliency and critical infrastructure of your assets. It identifies your vulnerabilities, and that's important because it helps you plan for support services and resources that you need to maintain that critical infrastructure. And it also pre-plans for public communication and outreach pre-event. And lastly, disaster debris planning enables rapid mobilization of contractors and resources to minimize delays in recovery efforts, ensuring regulatory compliance, and it streamlines your operations. The requirements for successful debris recovery operations, and I'm gonna highlight a couple of these are extremely important. And as John mentioned earlier, it's that development and that update to your debris management plan annually. Now, as you go through events, it's important to also implement those lessons learned in your debris management plan to really strengthen that plan. Maintain updated collection zones and GIS maps. And also very important, if you do plan on utilizing the state contract, review the state contract and the services that are offered under that contract pre-event. Identify those scopes of services that might be required and performed using federal grant for Category A and Category B funds. Now, this chart really provides an overview. It's a visual look of what the operations look like from a visual perspective. It's the operational flow and the different phases of debris management for Category A, debris removal, and Category B, emergency protective measures. And if you look at the first three boxes, they guide you through your post-award, your contract post-award, your event monitoring and alerts pre-event, and also that pre-event planning, that blue sky preparedness as well. The next couple of slides, which is 6 slides that are highlighted in red, they guide you through your Category B, which is your emergency protective measures, your force account labor, your emergency road clearance, your damage assessments, mobilization, and debris management site operations. The last 6 boxes are your Category A work, which includes your right-of-way collections, your processing, haul-out disposal, temporary debris management sites, restoration. And the last box highlighted in green just references your project closeout and your reconciliation. So Ashbridge's training and resource adopt a comprehensive strategy centered on the client, the community, and local vendors. Ashbridge's pre-planning strategy engages local vendors by providing them with opportunities to actively participate in the recovery mission. And this is very important because this actually helps have that local economy drive that recovery process. Now, if you have vendors currently that you are using and would like them to participate and like them to be part of our subcontracting network, please, we have opportunities via subcontractor workshops, and also they can register via online, which is accessible to the Ashbridge website. It's better to do that now pre-event so we can vet them through our system and they'll be set to go in the event of an emergency. Another available resource is Ashbridge's Online Training Academy. So our group has developed 4 videos that serve as refresher courses and are great for new staff entering the field. The first video is all about debris, 5 primary safety topics, debris management 101, and monitoring 101. These are all available at the ashbridge.com website, and the password to access these trainings is disaster recovery with the exclamation point. Additional resources that are available through Ashbridge for planned community outreach includes a debris separation guide. Now, this guide is customizable to your local waste collection program and aims to inform residents on how to properly segregate the storm debris. It's available in English and Spanish, and this is really important because it really starts with the residents on how to separate that debris for that right-of-way collection. We also have customizable public service announcements And we've developed a family preparedness campaign. It's a series that guides and helps families prepare for storm events. These are great for social media postings. They have one short, sweet, clear, and concise message and can be customizable just by placing your logo on them. We also have kid-friendly activity books. Kids can be hero helpers, and it helps children recover, reconnect, and develop resiliency through tough times. It highlights the emergency management heroes. And our last edition is Henry and the Hurricane, written by our Ashford CEO, Brittany Perkins Castillo. It's a story about how Henry and his family prepare for a hurricane. All these resources are available for download at strongerthanthestorm.com. Now we're going to talk a little bit about temporary debris management site setups and operations. So as John spoke earlier, temporary debris management sites are permitted parcels of land utilized for staging and processing of debris. They go through baseline environmental testing to capture a snapshot of the site's original condition. And this includes soil testing, the cataloging of known hazards, and historical and archaeological investigations of the site. Now I'm going to play a short video of what those temporary debris management site operations look like. Please let me know if you can see it. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can, Delia. Thank you.
Okay, great. So basically, this temporary debris management site was used in Collier County, Florida for Hurricane Irma. TDMS setup included the clearing of 40 acres. We had approximately 5,500 feet of road construction for stability. Hurricane Irma was a windstorm and generated more vegetative debris than C&D. And as you can see here, we have the excavators working to keep the debris away from the roadway to allow the trucks to make full passage through and offload their debris. Now, Hurricane Irma generated about 3.6 million cubic yards of debris, and this 40-acre parcel provided enough room to store and process a portion of the storm debris. In total, we had about probably 6 temporary debris management sites and 4 residential drop-off sites. Now, taking into consideration this is a massive site, and I know that in Massachusetts, space is very limited, and this would be the ideal parcel for a temporary debris management site. And as you can see, we have the separation of debris. We have the C&D at the far end. You have your veg in the middle. You have your grinding activities. And then over here at the corner, this is the ingress where you have the tower monitor up here. And then you have your exit monitor at the bottom here to ensure that when the trucks come through, those trucks are empty and they'll go back out and do more collections. So we are going to go into right-of-way collections, and I'm going to go ahead and play a short video as well. It may be a little noisy, so just bear with me. All right, so here we can see the claw truck collecting the debris on the right-of-way. You see the field supervisor assisting with sweeping up the debris for collections. Now, if you notice, although it looks close, the claw truck is far away enough from those power lines not to cause to that power line. Depending on the storm's impact, multiple right-of-way collection passes may be required. Standard is probably about 2 to 3. The debris monitor, you're going to see in a minute more. The debris monitor is on site. He's reporting the location, location and collection debris through their ADMS system. Now, the information captured in allows for the generation of the of your operational status report. Now, once the debris is processed at the temporary.
Delia, I'm sorry. We're losing your audio.
I knew it was a little bit noisy. So anyway, once the temporary debris management site, the material is hauled there, then to the permanent, it's hauled to a permanent facility once everything is processed. And it's important to note that every effort is made to maximize the recycling and the beneficial use of that storm debris, keeping in mind that landfill airspace is limited, and debris that's generated from these storms really can really have a high impact to these landfills and the life of expectancy of that landfill and that facility. So once the debris haul out is complete, the temporary debris management site undergoes a complete environmental baseline evaluation to restore the site to its pre-existing condition. The execution and final release is provided by the municipality, and the site then becomes officially closed. Joint surveys are completed to complete the missions reconciliation, which includes a punch list of the debris collections, making sure that all of the piles have been picked up on the right of way, and also any of the hot spots has also been cleared out. And so for final reconciliation, we work closely with the monitoring contractors to validate documents and project work by leveraging our database to expedite closeout and provide reimbursement support. We also assist clients with audits and documents requests for years after the project is completed. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Kurt.
All right, good morning, y'all. My name is Kurt Johnson. I am the Senior Project Manager for GMC. Prior to my time here with GMC, I actually worked with Witt O'Brien's for the better part of 12 years. And much like Delia mentioned, Witt O'Brien's, which has now been acquired by GMC, actually has held the statewide contract for the Commonwealth since 2011. And I've actually been the point of contact for the Commonwealth for the last 12 years. So I see quite a few familiar faces and names on the call today. So first thing there, just the statewide contract number, that PSE 02, that's pretty important. So I made sure to include that. And I think it's on the end as well. But next slide, Delia. So just topics for discussion today. I'll provide y'all some contact information. We'll go through the what, why, and how of debris monitoring, the different phases that we use as an approach. We'll go through our proprietary ADMS system, which is the Automated Debris Management System, Debris Pro Plus, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into the recent and upcoming changes to the Papa G that Max mentioned in the beginning. So I'll drop my contact information in the chat once this is over as well. I know the slides are going to be provided. That way, maybe you just don't have to dig back through it. But as I said, my name is Kurt Johnson. I've also provided contact information for Victoria Kelly, who is our leader of debris. She also comes to GMC from Witt O'Brien's as well, with 10 plus years there. And then Robert Ramsey, who is our Executive Vice President for the Disaster Recovery Division. So the what, why, and how of debris monitoring. So we'll talk about what is debris monitoring. It's the process of overseeing the debris removal operations to ensure that there's compliance with local, state, and federal regulations. Why is debris monitoring important? That one's pretty simple, and it's because FEMA requires it. It's required for reimbursement. If your debris removal efforts aren't properly monitored, it could jeopardize your PA funding. How is debris monitoring accomplished? We monitor all removal operations in the field as well as at the DMS sites. We certify the capacity of all the trucks and any other equipment that's being used. We ensure that the debris is being properly segregated. We ensure that no household hazardous waste or any other type of hazardous waste gets mixed with any other of the debris types or debris streams. We ensure that only eligible debris is removed and tracked appropriately. We ensure the debris haulers work within their contractual scope of work. And most importantly, we produce and maintain the necessary documentation of all eligible debris removal operations, which again are needed for reimbursement. So now we'll take a look at the 5-step phased approach that we use with GMC for the life cycle of the project. Those go through pre-initiation, mobilization, project initiation, execution, and then closeout. We'll go through each of these slides or each of these phases on the following slides. So the first step is the pre-initiation phase. Here we're meeting with the clients. This is typically done pre-season, as Delia mentioned, and it's mainly to ensure your readiness should an event occur. This includes reviewing your DMP, making any updates to that may be needed, providing technical support, guidance in selecting a DRC if you don't already have one, which you do for Ashbrit. Making sure that your contracts are up to date with current policy. Those are ever changing. So that's something that we make sure that we focus on. Obtaining shape files in the hauling contracts, assisting in identifying DMS sites, as well as offering debris monitoring training to your staff. So like Delia mentioned, this contract is in place now for your utilization. And much like Delia said, we do recommend having these contracts pre-positioned, having that mutual aid done pre-event, so that it allows us to do all of these things now, so that we're not playing catch up. We're actually seeing this a lot. I'm traveling and on the road right now in Georgia because we have several municipalities reaching out that were just hit by Debbie and they didn't have anything in place, and now they're scrambling trying to get an emergency contract into place. So establishing those relationships and building on that pre-event is paramount for sure. Next slide. So again, talking about the annual planning meeting, these are just some of the topics that we typically cover in our annual pre-event meeting to ensure the client's readiness. Again, huge benefit to having these that mutual aid agreement signed pre-event, so that we're able to go through all of these topics and not having to play catch up. Next slide. This will take us into the operations phase as we move into phase 2, which is the mobilization phase. Once that notice to proceed and the not to exceed is issued, our project management team will deploy along with any available trained field personnel, as well as one of our rapid response packages. These are enclosed trailers that we store and maintain around the country, and they contain everything that we need to stand up a project, from our electronics to the paperwork, our PPE, office supplies, water, field supplies, generators, and our health and safety equipment. If this is in response to an anticipated event, we would more than likely shelter in place prior to that notice to proceed or notice to, not to exceed being issued. Myself, as well as Ashford, I believe Rob and Delia were both there. We did this for Hurricane Henri a few years back, and we were actually in MEMA's EOC prior to that storm's arrival. And that, again, there's a huge benefit to that, just because it allows a more rapid response to the operations. Our goal is to begin operations as soon as possible. That's obviously going to be dependent on the type and severity of the event, as well as the available resources. We then go into the kickoff meeting, which will always include the client as well as Ashbrit to prioritize the efforts, discuss project timeline, and any procedures that need to be implemented. And that will take us into phase 3, which is the project initiation phase. The big focus here is establishing the resources needed based on, again, the type and the severity of the event, the hauling resources that are available, and the project timeline. We're implementing our standard plans and practices here, setting up project tracking systems, and hiring locals. That's something that we always like to emphasize. A lot of people think that the monitoring side kind of works like the hauling side, where it doesn't. The hauling side, they're professionals. This is what they do. All of their subs and everybody, For your monitoring firms, our management team is brought in. They are trained, they're professionals. This is what we do. But almost everyone else that we hire is, as the monitors, they're hired locally. We do this by advertising jobs in the impacted area, which are done pre and post storm, on the ground recruiting and social media. This is not only more cost effective to us and the client, it also ensures that there's revenue remaining or staying in that impacted area. So that's a big part of why we hire locals there. All right, so that'll take us into phase 4, which is the execution phase. Here, we're monitoring all the removal operations, coordinating any type of special debris removal operations, such as private property debris removal, household hazardous waste, white goods, etc. We support your PIO. If you don't have a PIO, we have a database of public information that we can help you get out. We're also reviewing and reconciling the haulers' invoices throughout the life cycle, and we'll go through that reconciliation process once we get into the Debris Pro Plus section a little deeper. So this one, the next slide shows just an example. This is something that we recommend all of our clients to get out to their citizens, if not pre-event, at least immediately after an event. As was mentioned, making sure that debris is placed on the right-of-way properly and that debris is properly segregated, it speeds up the project timeline tremendously. This is beneficial to everybody to ensure that your residents know kind of the expectation of how their debris should be placed and segregated. Next slide. So this graphic kind of gives you a snapshot of our ticketing process in the field. I know, Max, in the beginning, we were talking about paper tickets. We thankfully have gotten away from paper tickets. And so Debris Pro Plus, again, being an automated debris management system, is fully electronic, and it's quote unquote paperless. We do still print tickets at the DMS sites. We do that primarily for the debris haulers, so that they're able to track their debris amounts, as well as, for their subcontractors. But you are also provided actual hard copy tickets as part of your project documentation, which we'll go through that a little bit later. But so this again shows the ticketing process in the field. Each truck that's picking up debris will have a monitor with them. That process begins when the truck begins picking up the debris. The monitor will initiate the ticket when the truck arrives, and then the monitor ensures that they're only picking up eligible debris. And then once the truck is full, the field monitor will complete the ticket. They will then write that information to the NFC tag, which each truck has its own placard, its own truck number, and its own individual NFC tag. That truck then leaves, goes to the DMS. Once the truck arrives at the DMS, the tower monitor will then scan that NFC tag to retrieve the load ticket data. The tower monitor goes up, they make a load call from a tower. The driver then goes, offloads the debris while the tower monitor is completing that ticket. Once the truck is empty, as Delia mentioned, that truck will come back to the tower so that the tower monitor can ensure that they're empty. Truck's empty.
I am now. I've got a ophthalmologist that I see.
Sorry.
I think the speaker was muted also.
Kurt, are you able to come back?
Yep.
I think we got you
I'm
back.
back.
Kurt. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't realize that I was muted as well there. So I'm not sure where I got cut off there, but once the truck is empty, they return back to the tower to make sure that they're empty, as Delia mentioned. If the truck is empty, that driver is then issued their ticket, and then they go back out for their next load, and that process starts all over again. If there's debris remaining in the truck, the driver's asked to go back to the debris pile, finish off loading, and then they come back for reinspection to make sure that they're empty before they go out. And next slide. All right, so now we'll talk about DebrisPro Plus. As I mentioned, DebrisPro Plus is GMC's proprietary ADMS. This graphic shows you the features and some of the features and capabilities of our system to ensure not only proper documentation, but also to ensure your reimbursement. The graphic to the right is an actual ticket. As I mentioned earlier, back in the day, when I started doing this, we were on handwritten tickets. FEMA pushed all of the debris monitoring firms to go paperless. We did that, and then they came back and said, well, we still want to see the paper tickets as well. So even though our ADMS DebrisPro Plus allows us to be completely paperless and electronic in the field, we do still print these tickets every single night. Once the data is QA/QC'd and reconciled properly, our data manager will actually print these tickets. So there'll be an actual 8.5 by 11 full page ticket that you'll receive for every load of debris or every hazard removed for the duration of the project. And that, again, that's provided to you at the end of the project or during the project. If you're seeking early reimbursement, we can provide that information, that data, as often as possible or as often as needed. At the end of the project, we also provide an external hard drive, which will contain an electronic copy of all of your project documentation, the logs from the field, the daily reports, any incidents and accidents, as well as your load tickets, just so that that's easier during the audit process. If FEMA requests something or if the state requests something, it's easier to go back and find that electronically rather than going through banker boxes full of paperwork. So next slide. So another component of DebrisPro Plus is our ability to map and track the removal efforts and the progress. We do this by utilizing the Collector app, which is an Esri product. It allows us to track the number, status, and completion of each pass being made. Allows us to mark debris by type and delineate whether it's eligible or ineligible debris, as well as being able to generate flight paths, which are live streamed, and it ensures that every road is checked and that all eligible debris has been removed. From the onset of the project, you as the client, as well as Ashbrit, will be given a read-only access to DebrisPro Plus. That way, everyone is able to see the progress in real time, as well as the data and progress, the project progress, in real time. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot showing what the debris collection map looks like. Each one of these are pins that are associated with a load of debris that was removed. This was from the city of New Orleans, from an active project there. You'll be able to click on each one of these pins to view the full ticket data, which like you saw a while ago. It'll include the date, the time, the type of debris, the truck number, what zone they were in, who the monitor was, etc. So again, just gives you a real-time snapshot or view of what's going on in the field. Next slide. Another feature of DebrisPro Plus is our damage reporting feature. This allows our monitors, as well as our management team, to log any and all damages in the field in real time. These include the date and time, the pictures, location, homeowner information, who the responsible party is, details of the damage, and the remedial actions necessary. These reports, again, will be shared with the client and Ashbrit, and are kept open until they're rectified. Once the remedial action is satisfactory to the property owner, that report is then signed off on by the property owner as well as us and Ashbrit. And that's done to protect not only us, but Ashbridge being the hauler, and then you as the client as well, so that that resident isn't able to come back, 6 months later and say, well, they never fixed my mailbox or whatever the case may be. So, and again, all of this would also be included in your project documentation, both hard copy and electronically, so that you have it for your records as well. Next slide. So this graphic shows the hauler invoice reconciliation process that we discussed a few slides back. I know Delia touched on this as well. The hauler, in this case, which is Ashbridge, obviously they would import their ticket data from DebrisPro Plus and reconcile it against their records. Once their reconciliation process is satisfactory, Ashbridge would then generate an invoice and they would submit it to us at GMC for review. Those invoices always go to the monitoring firm first for reconciliation before the client receives it. So we then reconcile their invoice against our record. If there's no discrepancies, we would then notify Ashbridge that their invoice is correct, and we would generate a recommendation of payment and submit that to you along with Ashbridge's invoice and any and all supporting documentation. If there's any discrepancies identified during the reconciliation process, the invoice is then sent back to Ashbridge with the discrepancies for correction and then resubmittal. Then the invoice would then be reconciled again to ensure that 100% accuracy. Recommendation of payment would be created and then submitted to the client along with Ashbridge's invoice and the supporting documentation for payment. This process just implements an additional level of QA/QC that check, double check, triple check, just to ensure that there are no issues on the back end with your reimbursement. And finally, this takes us to the fifth step, which is the closeout phase. In this final stage, we're coordinating with Ashbridge and the client for a final pass, ensuring that the DMS sites are returned to their pre-use conditions, providing the project documentation needed for reimbursement. Again, that's hard copy and electronically. We're demobilizing our project staff and then providing any PA support that may be needed as well. Next slide. All right. So now we're going to talk about the current policies and the upcoming changes to the Papa G. And I'm going to focus on specifically as it relates to the hazardous limbs, trees, and stumps, which are also known as leaners, hangers, and stumps. There's a lot of changes coming with the upcoming release of the V5. So why do I want to focus on leaner, hangers, and stumps? Because typically they are higher value line items, and they are also the most scrutinized by FEMA. So this graphic here shows you the current FEMA requirements, that being it must be storm generated debris. You have to include GPS coordinates for each threat, documentation of the diameter of each hazard removed, photo documentation which establishes a threat to the right-of-way or public property, and the equipment used. On the next few slides, we'll look at the criteria for each of these hazards individually. So for hazardous limbs, the current eligibility requirements, as according to the Papa G V4, the limbs must be 2 inches or larger in diameter, measured at the point of the break. The limb or the branch must extend over the public right-of-way. It must pose an immediate threat, and the contractor would remove the hazard from the right-of-way without entering onto private property. And then only the minimum cuts necessary to remove the hazard is eligible. So, making sure that you're not going in and cutting out half a tree to remove one limb. That's the current eligibility criteria for hazardous limbs. For hazardous trees, the current eligibility, according to the Papa G V4, the tree needs to have, it must be 6 inches or more, measured 4.5 feet or breast high above the ground. It must also have either a split trunk, a broken canopy, and or leaning at an angle greater than 30 degrees. They also established that trees with 50% or more of the root ball exposed, that not only the tree but the root ball is also eligible for removal, and that's a one ticket cost. So that's all inclusive. They won't reimburse for two separate costs of removal of the tree and removal of the stump. If the tree has less than 50% of the root ball exposed, FEMA will only pay for that tree to be flush cut at the ground level, and then the disposal of the cut portion based on volume or weight. Grinding the residual stump after cutting is not eligible. Crews are not allowed to go past the right-of-way to cut a leaner, and the tree, again, must be cut at the right-of-way line. And hazardous stumps, the current eligibility according to the V4, stumps with 50% or more of the root ball exposed, removal of the stump and filling of the root ball hole is eligible. If grinding in place is more cost effective than extraction, grinding is also eligible. Stumps that are smaller than 2 feet in diameter or those not requiring extraction, FEMA will provide funding based on volume or weight only. The additional requirements for stumps, they must be 2 feet or larger in diameter, measured 2 feet above the ground. Extraction is mandatory for removal eligibility. And then the eligible cost, including extraction, transport, disposal, and filling of the root ball hole. Again, and that is an all-inclusive cost there. All right, so the current documentation requirements for leaners, hangers, and stumps, as per the V4, is that the client must retain and provide this documentation to FEMA if requested. The specifics of the hazard removed, including the GPS coordinates, pictures establishing the threat to the right-of-way or public property, the quantity removed, including the diameter of each hazard removed, the quantity, location, and source of the dirt that's used to backfill the root ball holes, as well as the equipment used. So what's changing with the Papa G V5, which the V5 is out for review right now. I believe we still have at least another week for review. We provided the links for that in the link library earlier in the presentation. So you'll actually be able to go in and see what the V5 looks like. And I also included a link there that has a summary of all of the proposed changes for the V5. So I would encourage you to take a look at those if you have time, especially before that question period ends in about a week. Next slide. So these are the upcoming criteria changes for hazardous limbs. So per the V5, the limb or branch must extend over the public right-of-way, which hasn't changed. The limb or branch must pose an immediate threat, and the contractor removes the hazard from the right-of-way without entering onto private property. Again, only the eligible cuts necessary, or the necessary cuts to remove the hazard, are eligible. Next slide. For hazardous tree, again, these are the upcoming criteria for hazardous trees. FEMA considers incident damaged trees to be hazardous and eligible for removal if the tree presents a hazard to the public due to conditions such as, but not limited to, deterioration or physical damage to the root system, trunk, stem, or limbs, and the direction and lean of the tree per the occupational safety health standards. Same trees with 50% or more of the root ball exposed, removal of the tree and the root ball and the filling of the root ball hole are eligible. FEMA will not reimburse two separate unit costs. Trees with less than 50% of the root ball exposed, FEMA will only provide funding to flush cut the item at the ground and dispose of the cut portion based on volume or weight. Grinding any residual stump after the cutting is not eligible. And then the upcoming criteria for hazardous stumps with 50% or more of the root ball exposed, removal of the stump and filling of the root ball hole are eligible. If grinding in place is less costly than extraction, grinding is eligible. Stumps that have less than 50% of the root ball exposed, FEMA will only provide funding to flush cut the item at the ground and dispose of that cut portion. Again, grinding any residual stump is ineligible. So here are these are the major changes that if put into effect in the V5 are concerning to not only us as a monitoring company. I can assure you, we've had these conversations with all of the prime debris haulers, including Ashbrit, and they all kind of feel the same, that these are some pretty major changes. But they're updating the requirements, which encourages the applicants to work with qualified individuals to perform an assessment of hazardous trees to determine if they can be saved by bracing rather than removal. They removed the condition that bracing a tree is eligible only when doing so is less costly than removal and disposal. They are removing the size requirements for limbs, trees, and stumps. So whereas now a hanger has to be 2 inches, a tree has to be 6 inches, and a stump has to be 24 inches, all those size requirements have been removed. And that actually, FEMA actually put out a memorandum a few years ago that was made policy, that wasn't included into the V4, but they actually removed those size requirements a few years ago via a memorandum. And I can tell you that every project that we've worked since then, the state has always asked for those size requirements as well as the photo documentation. So even though that size requirement has already been removed, the states still want to see it when they do their audit, and FEMA has even requested it doing their 1% sample audit as well. They also removed the specifics of the immediate threat with the location for GPS coordinates and photo or video documentation to be required to establish that the item is on public property. They also removed the note if a contractor charged an individual price for each limb, tree, or stump removed, that FEMA requires a diameter of each item removed. For stumps, the measurement must be 2 feet up the trunk from the ground. For trees, must be 4.5 feet up from the ground. All of that was removed from or will be removed, I guess, in the V5, which is current policy in V4. So the documentation requirements, again, this is as per the V5 that is out right now for review. They are again removing the size requirements, the GPS locations, and photo documentation requirements. Again, why is this a big deal? Like I just said, I can tell you, again, every storm that we've worked since, the states and FEMA are still asking for those GPS locations, the size requirements, as well as the pictures. Our recommendation, again, and I'm sure, like I said, we've had these conversations with Ashbrit, and the other prime hauling contractors all agree to follow your current contract. So the current contract for the Commonwealth with Ashbrit, all of these are identified. These line items are identified by size, and because you're going to be paying those line items according to the size difference, specifically for the stumps and the hazardous trees, we recommend that you follow your current contract until this policy changes and or until the contracts are amended to align with this new policy. We have not had any issue with following current contracts and current policy. Again, providing that additional information that either they no longer require or in the future will no longer require. We're still following the V4 and prior to the memorandum coming out, just to make sure that there's no issues, and you can't argue following a procured contract. So that's our recommendation on that. And that is the end of my presentation. Again, just providing that contract number there again. Thank you all for your time today. Any questions, obviously be happy to take them. If you can think of something, if you think something after the call please feel free to shoot me an email. Like I said, I will drop my contact information in the chat here as well. Thank you.
Great. So thanks, Max, John, Delia, and Kurt for all that great information today. I'm just going to run back through the chat quick, and Phil, I see you with your hand up as well. But just to address some of these questions, Tom Hutchinson, can you provide a debris removal contract template? I'll see what we have here and what we can find for you. Phil, can you provide a list of critical contacts for state and federal agencies with the slides? We can certainly work on that. Todd, a list of attendees. Yes, we can get you that. So the first up that I'll look to our panel to address, how are trucks weighed in temp scales? And Phil, if that's the same question that you have now, or if you want to come off mute and either add context to that, and I'll turn.
That was one during his presentation. You had a system in the field, and I presume you're going to temporary debris sites, and you mentioned a lot of tracking and so forth. So I don't know if you're doing a cubic yardage conversion for density on certain materials, or are you having to put temporary scales in the site? And I have other questions.
So for that one, and Delia, you may want to take this too, but the contract is based on cubic yardage and not it's a volume and not a weight contract. So there's not a necessity for scales in the field. Everything's done by a volume load call.
Gotcha, because it obviously in emergency, you don't have scales everywhere. I was unclear of the relationship between Ashbridge and GMC. It sounds like we have to have two contracts. I didn't understand the relationship. Are you the data tracker and Ashbridge's the response on the ground? Do I have that right?
Yes, sir. So Ashbridge is the debris hauler. So they're the ones that are actually picking up the debris. We're the monitoring firm that is monitoring those efforts and then providing you the documentation that you need for reimbursement.
So we should have relationships with both of you. That's good to know. I never heard of you before today. So my suggestion and just comment, when I think a tabletop exercise as a follow-up for part 2, where we take real data and then walk us through an example of how this was done in the community, have the rep from the community there, the paperwork, the internal municipal finance folks, how they were involved, the DPWs, just kind of walk through, because this is a tremendous amount of material. And now we have to translate this and put it in an action plan. But, where we have some examples in Massachusetts, love to see, where would we be? And I'm, at the disposal site for these, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Goddard. I work with the town of Bourne. We're one of the 5 landfills. I think what is missing a little bit is the towns need to understand where their trash goes right now, where their debris goes, where the hazardous waste goes, and need to identify. And assumptions may be made that, those 5 landfills will take care of everything. Well, we have limits, and we also there are a lot of rail transfer facilities out there now that John, I think maybe need to be put into the mix for identification to go to out-of-state landfills. I'm thinking Wind Waste Innovations to go to Tunnel Hill as 10,000 tons a day of capacity, where C&D goes out of state now. Just having that in the mix, and especially those communities that go to waste and energy facilities, they may think they've got their disposal handled, but CMAS is not going to take wet couches and carpets and mattresses and things like that. So I just throw that out there for the disposal community and the logistics that we're trying to meet internally on all those, the landfills and folks, because we're going to get the phone calls that you all are going to call us. And I just think that tabletop exercise comes into play, and the rail folks, I didn't see them listed, John, but there's 15,000 tons a day of rail capacity in the state now. So I just throw that out there for consideration. Lots of great information. Thank you for doing this.
Great, thanks, Phil. And John, go ahead.
Unmute there. I just wanted to add a little bit to follow up on Phil's comment. Yeah, Phil, I totally agree. I didn't represent the transfer capacity in my slides, and of course there's a lot of rail transfer capacity, but what I wanted to emphasize is the limited in-state capacity, and also what I didn't say is that, especially with landfills, that capacity is finite, and the more disaster debris we put in there, the less we have available for other debris. So we're really cognizant about trying to preserve that capacity as best we can, just for our ongoing solid waste management needs. And the other thing that I didn't say, but I'll add here, is that Mass DEP has in the past and would again issue approvals for solid waste facilities to take more material in, to temporary increases in tonnage limits and things like that. We would stand ready to do that. However, even when we do that, there may be operational limits to what those facilities can do. So even with a permit increase, there may still be limits in what they can take, but we would have some flexibility in that regard.
Thank you. And that's what this is the next level the towns need to consider who they're going to, what their capacity is, and then there's going to be only so much each site can do. We were there when CMAS had a propane tank fire. We took all the Cape's trash overnight, and it was a massive, impact. And you did increase our permits, as did Meat and Cape Cod Commission. So that's just the next level on the local area. You need to, contact your disposal network for those very reasons. You may find that you were the last caller to get in, so sorry, we're all full. You need to go to the next site, and you don't want to be on that phone call and not have a backup plan. So thank you for those additions.
Awesome. Great discussion. Thank you. Chris Bouchard from Mass.IC had a question. And Chris, if you want to expand on it at all, please feel free to jump off mute. But how does this work when using ANSI standards for trimming and removals for trees and future health of the trees that this could affect?
Yeah, they're just talking about, the standards, just removing the hazard and stuff. When there's ANSI standards for trimming trees, back to the trunk. And once you remove 30% of the tree, you have to remove the tree, because this just creates a hazard down the road. And, with previous events, we've run into that, and it just creates a burden on the communities, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road. So, is anybody looking at that just to remove the hazard today? Now it's a hazard 5 years down the road that, I know what they're looking at. But is this being considered that instead of just cutting and clearing that little hanger, that this is going to create a longer term hazard, that they're actually creating a bigger hazard, with their proposed changes to that? That there's a standard for trimming and removals. That's what I'm asking. Are they following that, or are they just creating their own standard for it?
So the policy as it relates to only removing the hazard, that portion hasn't changed from the 325, the 327, the V4, or even the V5 that's coming out. FEMA will only pay for that hazard to be removed. Specifically, that's more so for the hangers. What they don't want to see is they don't want to see someone come in and cut out half of a tree to remove one small hanger. However, the criteria for the hazardous tree, as you mentioned, 30% or more, being removed. If the canopy is broken, and that's something again that has changed over the years, and the different versions of the Papa G that have come out. It used to be it had to have 50% of the crown had to be broken or blown out for that tree to be removed. Now the current policy says it just has to have a broken canopy. So if there's 30% of that tree missing, per se, that entire tree is going to be removed, depending on whether the root ball is exposed or not. If the stump's going to be extracted as well, but if there's substantial damage to that tree, they will pay for that entire threat to be removed, the entire tree to be removed. Their biggest concern again is for the hazardous limbs, making sure that we're not going in and cutting out a third of a tree to remove 1 2-inch hanger.
Great. Thanks, Kurt, for that additional context there. And Phil, great suggestion there for the next time we host a training like this, to add some context from one of our municipalities that has been through this full process. We have about 5 minutes left. If there are any other questions, now's a great time to either throw them in the chat, or certainly you can come off mute if it's a longer question. we'll give it another minute or so if there's none. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody for their attendance today. And as a point of clarification, tomorrow's training is a repeat of this training, so it's not, there's no new information necessarily being presented tomorrow. So if you received both meeting invites, certainly no need to take up time tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. But if you have other staff that weren't available this morning, and now that you've sat through it, if you want them to sit through it, certainly let me know and I can forward the meeting invite.
To follow up on that comment I made at the end there, we talked a lot about the physical response and the debris management. Obviously, it's the paperwork response, and that involves a whole sector that's different from staff at the town, and they're not on this call. That's the finance directors, the town administrators, managers, city managers. So I think maybe having a class on that with all the FEMA paperwork, how you're going to pay for it, how you're going to get reimbursed, all the T's you got to cross and I's you got to dot, what's the timeline, all that, sort of detail where people are stressed out, but afterwards, in the weeks afterwards, it's all the fights over, this is reimbursed. Now you're getting into root ball sizes and, getting audited and, town accountant audits and DOR is going to get involved potentially. So I think there's so much detail there that would be very, very helpful for that staff as well. So, yeah, and just a suggestion, because I know that's gonna, you got one half the town worried about just picking it up, and the other half is gonna be like, how are we gonna pay for all this? Especially if Bourne, for example, we're processing debris from 5 different towns. Who's paying Bourne right now? I don't know. I mean, we'll figure it out, but hopefully you have a blue sky plan. I like that, Delia.
Certainly, and point well made, Phil. Yeah, and we've got our work under us for the next time we host this training and how we can continue to make this valuable for everyone. Any other thoughts from the group as we wind down here? All right, great. Thank you everyone for attending today. I really appreciate it. And I'll send the slides as well as the recording later this afternoon. I really appreciate everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.